We read last week from our Old Testament reading about the birth of Jacob and Esau, the twins. Maybe I should have said Esau and Jacob because Esau was the older one. And we saw there that Jacob is the one chosen by God. First is that when they were in the womb, God told Rebekah, the elder will serve the younger. Then we also read about Esau selling his birthright. Because by these two incidents, it was clear that Jacob is the one who was blessed by God and that therefore will inherit the promise of Abraham, promise given to Abraham. But then something happened in between. Isaac either didn't know about this God's election of Jacob, or because it was God who only spoke to Rebekah. Maybe Rebekah wasn't a good communicator and didn't even tell her husband. And also what happened between Esau and Jacob was just between two of them. Or maybe he just knew about it, then ignored it. And for whatever reason, anyway, Isaac, the father of these twins, wanted to bless Esau instead of Jacob. And he made a plan of that, but Rebekah, by some tricks, deceived Isaac and obtained the blessing for Jacob. So Jacob was now blessed, was shown as a chosen one in three different ways. But it caused a problem. Esau had a very grudging mind about this and wanted to kill Jacob and was looking for an opportunity for that. And Rebekah, finding out, just advised Jacob to flee from that place and go to her hometown of Haran. What Rebekah didn't think about at the time was what we read about 2 weeks ago when Rebekah was brought from Haran to Canaan to get married to Isaac. Abraham just told the servant that the servant was not to take Isaac to Haran, but bring the bride to Canaan, because this is the promised land. And therefore, Isaac really should stay in the promised land. But now Jacob is leaving the promised land to go back to, it wasn't really going back for him, but for the family, to go back to Haran, where his family was from originally, but God called them out of that place. So then the reader might just ask this question: although Jacob was chosen by God and was blessed, maybe he's losing the blessing by going back to Haran. And Jacob, I don't know whether he asked that question or he knew all about these blessings of Abraham, but he was certainly disappointed because he thought that he would obtain the blessing, but now he has to flee from his brother. And he has to live a kind of life of fugitive, and if not fugitive, a life of an exile in a way. And he didn't go with lots of things, apparently, because he was just sleeping in an open air on the first night. And he didn't even pack a pillow, it seems. So he just put a stone and used a stone as a pillow. And he was sleeping on the first night, still in the land of Canaan. And he had a dream. It says there was a stairway on the ground with its top reaching the sky, and God's angels were going up and down on it. And this image of stairway from the ground to the top of the sky, because sky is the same word actually in the language of Hebrew with the heaven, and God's angels coming and going back and forth, shows that God is connecting with his people. In particular with Jacob. God is connecting. God is communicating and helping. God is not a distant God, but God is coming down, helping, and He's sending angels to come down and up. So this is really great image that Jacob saw in his dream. And this is the image that kind of contrasts what happened in the Tower of Babel, where people wanted to build up the tower to reach God, but God punished them by scattering them with words, with different languages. But now it is not people trying to reach out to God, but God trying to reach people. And that's what Christian religion is about. It's not people are reaching out to God, but God is reaching out to people. It's not that people are just trying to find out who God is, but God reveals Himself to us. But besides this image, God also speaks to Jacob in his dream. He says, I am the Lord, the God of your father, Abraham, and the God of Isaac. He identifies himself as God of these people. Well, the word father, by the way, in the language refers to father, grandfather, or ancestors, all the ancestors too. So maybe it would have been better translated as God of your grandfather Abraham, because Abraham is Jacob's grandfather. But anyway, it's your grandfather, I'm the God of your grandfather, and God of Isaac. And I gave the promise to them about the descendants, and therefore I'm your God as well. This is what God is saying here. And says, I will give you the offspring, the land on which you are lying. So this is a promise that God gave to Abraham. But this promise is especially special to Jacob, not only possibly because Jacob didn't know about this promise before, but now that he's leaving this land. So God is leaving this land thinking maybe I will just live a life of exile all my life. But He's saying, no, I will still give you this land. So God is saying that I am faithfully to my promise, although it doesn't seem that you are attaining the promise at this time. Then He says, your offspring will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread toward the west, the east, the north, and the south. The first part of the promise is the same promise as given to Abraham, but the second part is new here. The God was more talking about giving the land to Abraham and to Isaac, but now He's talking about you will spread out over the world. So here we see that the promise of this land is the promise to give the base, promise to give the beginning, but God's eventual will, ultimate will, is that His descendants will spread out around the world. And that is what happened. When James, who we celebrate, was martyred early in the Christian history, of course he didn't know how quickly the Christendom will spread. But now we have churches all around the world. And we know and this is the fulfillment of that promise, because we are true descendants of Jacob, because we are adopted children of Jesus Christ, who is a descendant of Jacob. So we see here that God's promise of spreading to the world is really happening in our days. And again, this is in contrast with the Tower of Babel, because in the Tower of Babel, they were scattered because they didn't listen to God. They challenged God. But now we are scattered because we are blessed by God. The similar results, but for different reasons. They were scattered so that they were power, the people were scattered so that they won't put their power together against God. But now we are scattered to bless the whole world. Because the next part of the promise is what we see about the purpose of this spreading. All the peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. So here we see that the promise that was given to Abraham was again given, but with one more addition. Your offspring was added. Although that was implied in the promise to Abraham, now God is making it more explicit, that your offspring will bless the whole land. Again, we can say that because we are here in Adelaide, we are really blessing Adelaide. We Christians have spread all around the world to bless each part of the world, each family of the world. That's what God is doing through Christians. Then he says, I am with you and will watch over you. Wherever you go, I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you. So this is the assurance that Jacob really needed at the time. Because he probably was thinking, did God really bless me? If God really blessed me, why should I just run away at this time? But God says, don't worry about that. You are running away, but what matters is that I am with you. I am with you even though you are suffering. You are at your low moment of your life, but I am still with you and I will be with you. And this is what is important. If you just feel comfortable and everything, that's not what is important now, because it might just turn around at another time. But as long as God is with you, then even if you are in a very low moment of your life, then at the end, everything will be good because God is keeping His eye on us. And that's what actually our New Testament reading says as well. That the glory that we are receiving later is much greater than the suffering that we are receiving now. We, children of the kingdom, as our gospel reading says. And Jacob woke up and he says, surely the Lord is in this place and I did not know it. See, he didn't know that God was really helping him. But now he knows it is true. God was at this place, really meant a lot to him. And God is with us. Not only was God in that place where Jacob lied on the night, God is with us whenever we gather to praise His name, to see God's presence, especially with the Holy Communion. God is with us. And he further says, this is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. By talking about the house of God and gate of heaven, he's saying that heaven is open to us. If the gate of heaven is open to us, then we can really reach heaven. Even when we are here, we are connected to heaven as we live on the earth. That's what he's saying. This is the blessing that God's people enjoys. And he just put oil. He just used the stone that he was using as a pillow and put it there and put an oil on there, because he practically had nothing really to offer to God. But oil was a symbol of consecration at the time. So he's consecrating the place with this oil. And so it's an act of worship. His response to God's blessing was an act of worship. And he calls that place Bethel, house of God. And This is the house, this is really the house of God. That's what he said, and he calls that place with a name. And this was an important place because Jacob, later, when he's in again another low moment, comes back to this place to worship God, knows that God will appear to him, is a God who will keep him strong to the end. And this place becomes a center of worship for a long time before the temple was built. So again, the place where God's presence was known is the place where we reach God. So, and that shows that God's presence is central to our worship. We worship God, not a distant God, but God who is with us very closely. And God showed this by sending his own Son to us, to Jesus Christ. Of course, much later than this event, 2,000 years later. But God was with him, with Jacob, and God was with Jesus. Or God was Jesus. And so Jesus was with us, and that means God was with us. And he's still with us through our service, through our worship, and especially when we take the Holy Communion. So this amazing story teaches us a great deal. For one thing, it shows that when we are despondent, God is still with us. When it was a very difficult time for Jacob, God gave an assurance that God is with him. And that is true to us as well, because we are the true descendants of Jacob. God made it very clear that this blessing was not just for Jacob, but for his descendants. And that means that this blessing that God said to Jacob is valid for us as well. We inherited this blessing. So God is with us. And we, because of this blessing, God is with us, and we are spread out throughout the world to bless others as well. So what is our response to this great blessing? We have to cherish, we have to love this blessing. We have to hold on to this promise of blessing. And in response, we have to worship God by participating in the communion regularly, but also giving ourselves, our whole life as worship, always reflecting upon God and always glorifying God. So let us do that and give glory to God. Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.